The bass rolled through the ceiling like a second heartbeat and shook the frost off the windows. On the second floor above a sleek restaurant, bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder under blue lights that made everything look colder than it felt. Coats hung off railings. Sweat fogged the glass. The stairwell that served as the main way in and out was already slick with melted snow from the line outside. Guards in black shirts waved metal detectors and stamped wrists. People kept coming because it was a winter night, and inside felt like proof you were still alive. On the dance floor, two men jawed over a spilled drink. The kind of bump that's nothing until pride makes it something. Friends got between them and made it worse by pushing. A woman lost a heel and screamed when someone stepped on her bare toes. A guard leaned in, hand up, trying to split the circle. The crowd pressed in to watch because that's what crowds do, and the circle went tight as a fist. Security chose speed over patience. A canister popped. The spray hung in the air in a flat, bitter sheet that tasted like coins. People closest to the mist grabbed their faces and bent over coughing. Those a few steps back saw the bent shapes and thought fight, knife, gun, anything but a decision made too fast. Someone shouted, "Gas!" and the word outran the truth. The first bodies moved as a one-step shuffle toward the staircase, then 10 moved, then 100. The stairwell was a narrow run dropping to a set of glass doors. A metal detector table half-blocked the landing, shoved there earlier to make space. A security gate stood rolled up above the doorway, its track like teeth. Winter coats hooked on purse straps. Brimmed hats flew and vanished under shoes. A woman with a hand stamped in ultraviolet ink tried to turn around and found the railing against her ribs. A man lost his footing on the wet step and took 3 others with him. Somewhere behind, another burst of spray went off, either a guard trying to hold a line or a scared person clutching a can they shouldn't have had. The chemical joined the panic like wind under a flame. From the street, people saw what looked like smoke push out from above the doors and heard a kind of muffled thunder. The doors swung the wrong way for the force behind them. Those in front hit the glass, then hit it again because that's what bodies do when they're being told by muscle and fear to go forward. The sound shifted from music to a layered human noise, shouting, a ripping rasp of breath, the grind of plastic against tile. A man at the front finally got the door partway open and held it until someone stumbled through and knocked him sideways. The opening closed again under the weight. Inside the pinch point, faces pressed against jackets and arms. A woman drew air through a stripe in another woman's sweater and thought it smelled like laundry and peppermint gum. A man found space for his hands by sliding them into the pockets of the person crushed against him. He felt a phone he couldn't reach to use. Another realized the only air left was just above the baseboard and flattened his cheek to the floor. A shoe heel snapped with a sound that, later, witnesses would describe in perfect detail because certain sounds never leave. The first patrol car rolled up on a disturbance call and then called everyone. Officers pulled at bodies near the door and made no mark on the pile. More units arrived. Firefighters came with halogen bars and a habit of not wasting motion. They forced the doors wider and found human shapes stacked 3 deep on the stair in positions no one chooses. Rescuers formed a chain, one at the doorway, one 2 steps in, another 5 steps up, handing out people who looked asleep and were not. The sidewalk became a triage line. Paramedics crouched on bare knees in the slush and pushed air into lungs that fought to reopen. Someone used a flashlight to check pupils, the beam trembling because his hand was numb. Sirens layered the night until you couldn't hear any one of them, only the idea of sirens. Inside, the club still held music because no one had hit the sound booth yet. It sounded obscene against what sat on the stairs. A firefighter stepped over a field of lost items, purses dumped out, phones dark, 100 winter hats, and reached the top landing. The air was sharp with spray and sweat, and the sweet wrongness that comes from a crowd breathing too hard in a sealed place. He shouted for lights and for someone to cut the sound. Somewhere a DJ finally killed the board, and the silence that landed became a kind of gravity. People who had made it to corners or bathrooms came out with red eyes and raw voices. They were walked to windows for air, and then guided down a secondary stair that had been hidden behind a velvet rope all night. Other doors existed, investigators would later note, emergency exits, a balcony egress, but some were blocked by furniture, some were locked, and some opened onto roof areas with no safe descent. The main stair had taken the full load because the crowd knew it, and because a crowd is a river that seeks the channel it remembers. At the hospitals, waiting rooms turned into treatment bays. Nurses lined people against walls and marked forearms with grease pencil. Who had air, who needed it now, who needed to go first. The symptoms split in two. One group showed the signature of chemical spray, eyes burning, coughs, skin flushed. The other group didn't have a mark on them and yet couldn't draw breath past vocal cords bruised from pressure. Doctors and respiratory therapists worked side by side, one problem loud and one quiet. Phones in the lobby would not stop ringing. By dawn, the club was a crime scene, a rescue site, and a morgue corridor. 21 names would go on the list, all from compressional asphyxia, the medical phrase for what happens when a body becomes a wall and lungs can't win against it. Photographs from that morning show clean geometric things, a stairwell, a railing, a doorframe, and then the small, terrible evidence of scale, a smear at exactly shoulder height, a clump of hair caught on a hinge, a pile of phones gathered onto a table waiting for owners who would not return. Outside, relatives pressed against tape, giving descriptions no one wanted to imagine the right fit for. Black sweater with silver thread, jeans with a rip at the left knee, a ring with a small heart. Inspectors walked with clipboards and looked at the building as if it could answer. Records showed a court order had closed the second floor months earlier for code violations, but the club operated anyway. A judge's language about egress and overcrowding read like a warning written in advance for this exact night. Capacity numbers, posted and ignored, came up in interviews. Staff said they'd been told to funnel the crowd to the main exit because that's where the ID checks were and where eyes could be kept on trouble. The pepper spray decision sat at the center like a coal, legal to possess, lethal when mixed with panic and a single bad choke point. Investigators reconstructed the minute-by-minute path. Guards used spray in a fight near the VIP area. Word spread that gas had been released. The crowd turned as one toward the staircase. People fell on the slick steps. The doors yielded inches and then shut again under the weight. The pile hardened into a plug. The deaths happened within minutes in a space measured in feet. No fire, no weapon, only decisions and a layout that left no slack. The owners went before cameras and expressed sorrow and surprise. City officials faced the other side of the lens and said enforcement would be tightened. In court, the focus narrowed to paperwork. Who knew about the closure order? Who ignored it? Who signed what and when? Criminal charges rose and fell on legal definitions that made grieving families grind their teeth. In the end, the clearest verdict came from the civil world and from policy. You don't open a floor that a judge has closed. You don't block an exit for convenience. You don't use irritant spray in a room that holds more people than you can count quickly by sight. Clubs across the city walked their spaces with new eyes. Bouncers learned to break fights with hands and training instead of a cloud in a can. Managers practiced clearing a room through every door, not just the front. Fire marshals started popping in on weekends and at midnight, not on weekday afternoons when spaces behave. The stair at E2 stayed in photographs brought to trainings for years after. One image that says everything about what a crowd will do when the channels fail. Families carried forward what official language never can. Birthdays rolled around with an empty chair. A father kept calling his daughter's phone to hear her voicemail greeting until the account shut off. A brother started standing near exits in every theater and church and didn't sit until the lights went down. A survivor learned to sleep again by counting the breaths she took before each traffic light and telling herself that air isn't scarce anymore. They built a small memorial and learned to speak their people's names beside it without breaking apart, or to break and put themselves back together in public. What happened at that club is simple when you strip it to parts. A fight put guards under pressure. A spray meant to control created panic. A staircase designed for flow became a trap. A locked or blocked door turned physics into law. 21 people died because every safeguard that should have been ordinary, clear exits, trained staff, honest capacity, rules obeyed when no one's watching, failed at once. The winter air outside was sharp and clean all that week. You could see your breath, which is how you knew you still had it. Thank you for listening to Road to Ruins. Subscribe for more true stories where systems fail and people pay the price.